What if the people meant to protect you are the ones breaking you the most? Ever felt like the black sheep in your own home? Here's the truth they never tell you. You keep trying to earn their respect. But what if I told you that's exactly why they don't give it? If your own family disrespects you, you don't just notice it, you feel it, deep like a punch in the gut. They interrupt you mid-sentence. They roll their eyes at your choices. They chuckle when you speak from the heart, like your words don't matter. And maybe the hardest part, they treat total strangers with more kindness than they ever gave you. That kind of hurt cuts deeper than anything else, because it's not coming from strangers. It's coming from the very people who were supposed to lift you up, protect you, and believe in you. But here's the hard truth. Nobody wants to say out loud. You will never be respected by waiting to be chosen. You will never feel valued if you're constantly jumping through hoops to prove you're enough. And the second you stop chasing their approval and start standing firm in who you are, everything begins to shift. You won't just earn respect, you'll command it. And hey, if you're someone who craves deep, real talk about Stoicism, growth mindset, and how to navigate life with clarity and courage, my free newsletter is made for you. Every Sunday I send out raw insights, powerful truths, and practical tools that help you level up. No fluff, no filters. Just honest, empowering content to fuel your week. Want in? The link's below. Join the tribe. And if you're a brand looking to reach a loyal, high-intent audience, let's collaborate. My email's in the description. Let's build something meaningful. Now let me tell you something personal, something I wish I realized earlier. Rule number 1, don't try to change them. Upgrade yourself. I used to believe that if I just worked harder, they'd finally see me. If I got better grades, if I stayed polite, stayed helpful, made myself more available, maybe then they'd accept me. Maybe then they'd love me how I needed to be loved. I told myself, they're just tired, they're just stressed. They don't mean it. So I tried, God, I tried. I silenced myself, bit my tongue at family dinners, nodded along just to avoid becoming the punchline. I said yes to things I didn't want to do, over and over, just to feel included. I let them make fun of my dreams, dismiss my goals, belittle my path. And every time I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd finally earned their respect, they moved the goalpost. It was never enough. It was never going to be enough. And then it hit me like a wave I couldn't ignore. I wasn't the problem. They were simply not capable of seeing me for who I really was. Some people, yes, even family, are so trapped in their own unhealed mindset, they can't recognize growth because they've never done it themselves. To them, your evolution feels like a threat. It reminds them of everything they never became, so they mock it, they laugh at it, they pretend it's meaningless, not because you're small, but because they feel small around you. And as hard as that was to accept, it was also the moment that changed everything. One day I made a decision. I stopped performing for their approval. I stopped over-explaining myself. I stopped giving them front-row seats to a life they didn't value. Most importantly, I stopped shrinking myself to make them comfortable, because I finally realized I don't need their permission to be powerful, and neither do you. Like I said, I stopped trying to prove anything. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped giving them VIP access to a life they never valued. And most importantly, I stopped shrinking just to make them feel big. Instead, I started upgrading me. I chose silence, not weakness. I turned inward. I hit the gym, poured sweat into every rep. I devoured books like I was starving for truth. I tuned out the noise and got serious about my finances, my mindset, my confidence. Little by little, I started rebuilding myself from the inside out. I stopped showing up in rooms where I was only tolerated. I stopped texting people who only remembered me when they needed a favor. And I built a life that didn't need applause to feel real. Months passed, then years, and slowly, the same people who used to mock me, they started speaking differently. They started watching. They stopped laughing. Why? Because I outgrew the role they assigned me. I no longer fit into the little box they built for their comfort. Here's a deeper truth. You will never be respected by the people you're always trying to please. Because the moment you crave their approval, you give them the power. They get to decide if you're worthy. They set the bar, and most of the time they set it so high you'll exhaust yourself trying to reach it. But when you stop seeking validation and focus on upgrading yourself, something shifts. You become undeniable. They may still not like you, but they can't ignore you, and that is more powerful than any attempt to change them, because the truth is, you can't. You can't heal someone who doesn't even realize they're broken. You can't get love from someone who hasn't learned to love themselves. And you sure as hell can't earn respect from someone who never respected themselves to begin with. So stop knocking on locked doors. Build your own house. Let them hear the sound of the hammer. Let them sit in the quiet when you stop performing. Let your success echo through the walls they built to shut you out. Let your peace disturb the chaos they live in. But most of all, remember this. You're not doing this to prove them wrong. You're doing it to prove yourself right. You don't need them to believe in you. You just need to believe in yourself long enough until you become someone they can no longer overlook. That's when the real shift happens. Not when they change, but when you do. Because the moment you stop chasing respect and start walking like you already have it, that's the moment the world and even your own family starts watching in silence. Lesson 2. Master emotional detachment. There was a time in my life when just one offhand comment from a family member could ruin my entire week. It didn't even have to be a full-blown insult. Often it was subtle. A smirk when I shared a goal. A sarcastic glance when I spoke with passion, or worse, silence. The kind of silence that screams louder than words. We don't take you seriously. I used to carry those moments like stones in my chest. I'd replay them in my head, obsess over them, come up with the perfect comebacks that I'd never actually say, and then I'd wonder why I always felt so drained after being around them. But the reason wasn't that they were powerful. It was that I kept giving them power. Every time we react, when we snap, get flustered, storm off, shut down, what we're really saying is, you still have access to my peace. And that's exactly what they feed on. I'll never forget the moment this truth clicked. It was at a family dinner. One of those big gatherings where everyone's pretending to be polite while secretly sizing each other up. Like I said, emotional detachment is a superpower. And I truly discovered its strength in a moment that could have easily broken the old version of me. It happened at a family gathering. One of those dinners where people smile with their mouths, but not their eyes. One of my relatives leaned in with that all too familiar fake smile, the kind that masks judgment behind politeness, and said, "So what are you doing these days? Still playing around with that little side project of yours?" In the past, I would have gone into full defense mode. I would have listed every milestone I hit, every hour I worked, every little achievement, like I was standing trial, desperate to prove my worth. I would have tried to earn respect, as if it were a prize they could hand out whenever they pleased, but that day, I didn't. I looked them straight in the eye, held my calm, smiled, and said with complete ease, "Still building. You'll see. Then I turned to someone else and asked how their week was. That one moment shifted everything for me, because in that instant, I chose emotional detachment over emotional reaction. And I realized this is a deeply underrated superpower, especially when you're surrounded by subtle disrespect. But let me be clear, emotional detachment isn't about being cold. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about owning your emotions so completely that no one else gets to pull your strings. When you master it, something powerful happens. You stop arguing to prove your worth. You stop shrinking just to fit in. You stop exploding when someone pokes your ego. Instead, you remain grounded, calm, clear, confident. You begin to see that their words, their sarcasm, their jabs, their passive-aggressive smiles say far more about them than they ever did about you. They think you're weak because you're quiet. Let them. They think you're lost because you're on your own path. Let them. You owe no one an explanation. You owe no one a performance. What you owe is yourself, your peace, your boundaries, your power. And that peace, it starts the moment you stop internalizing their projections. Because here's the truth, most disrespectful family members aren't actually speaking to you. They're speaking to an unhealed version of themselves. Their sarcasm is their insecurity. Their superiority is their regret. Their fake concern is just guilt in disguise. When you react, you validate their projection. But when you stay composed, you expose it. And let me tell you, emotional detachment isn't about dropping one savage comeback or walking away from the dinner table like a hero. It's a daily discipline. It's waking up every morning and choosing to carry yourself and not their expectations. It's learning that your peace is non-negotiable. It's reminding yourself again and again. Respect isn't something you earn by pleasing others. It's something you build by honoring yourself, even if nobody claps for you. And slowly something beautiful begins to unfold. The chaos. It no longer gets inside you. You show up to family gatherings with a new energy, not bitter, not closed off, but untouchable. Because now you know who you are. You know what you value, and you know that no amount of disrespect can reach someone who has learned to stand strong in their own worth. So let them roll their eyes. Let them whisper. Let them misunderstand you all they want. Your peace is not a toy. Your energy is not charity. Your emotions are not a playground. And when you finally learn to protect them, you don't just earn respect, you command it. 3. Don't fight for the spotlight. Build your own stage. There's something soul-crushing about trying to earn recognition in a room where you're constantly overlooked, especially when that room is filled with people who are supposed to love you without condition. I remember one Christmas, I was standing in the living room I grew up in. Everyone was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole extended family. One of my cousins had just landed a corporate job, and you would have thought he cured cancer, the way they celebrated him. Applause, compliments, hugs, admiration like he just won a gold medal. Meanwhile, I had just completed my first major creative project, something I poured my soul into. I was proud of it. It mattered to me. Like I said, there's nothing more crushing than being ignored in a room where you're supposed to be celebrated. But what came next? That moment taught me something even deeper. I had poured months of effort, late nights and countless sacrifices into my project. I gave it my time, my energy, my passion, all of it. So when someone casually asked, "What are you up to these days?" I smiled. I shared my progress with pride, thinking maybe, just maybe, this time they'd see me. Silence. Someone changed the subject. Another person walked off to refill their wine glass. And just like that, my moment, the one I had quietly hoped for, disappeared. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling for hours, turning one question over and over in my mind. Why does my family only respect certain kinds of success? Why do I always feel like I'm performing for their approval? And still failing. Then it hit me, hard and clear. I had been waiting for them to hand me the spotlight, waiting for that long overdue moment where someone would finally say, "We're proud of you." Waiting to be seen. But I realized something far more powerful. The people who never gave you the spotlight were never meant to control your light. You don't need a seat at their table. You don't need applause from people who never understood your journey. And you absolutely do not need to beg for space in a room that was never built to celebrate you in the first place. So I stopped fighting for the spotlight. I started building my own stage. That meant going all in on the things I loved, even when they didn't get it. It meant taking myself seriously, even when they didn't. It meant creating, evolving, improving, not to prove anything to them, but to build something that could grow far beyond their limited perception of who I was. And the irony? The moment I stopped trying to impress them, they started watching. No claps, no cheers. Just quiet observation from a distance. That's when I knew the dynamic had shifted. Because when you stop performing for a spot in their light and start building your own, you become impossible to ignore. And here's the truth. Your family might not recognize your value right now, but that says nothing about you. It says everything about them, their conditioning, their narrow view of success. They're used to the safe path. They celebrate titles, degrees, and promotions. So when you show up with vision, with passion, with dreams that don't come with a salary or a certificate, they get uncomfortable. Let them. Because you weren't born to fit into their comfort zone. You were born to carve your own lane brick by brick, to build your own platform, your own path, your own stage. And that stage, you don't build it with validation. You build it with discipline, with sleepless nights, with silent progress, and with a flame inside so steady their doubt can't blow it out. And eventually, that stage will shine so brightly that even the ones who once dismissed you will have no choice but to see it. But by the time they do, you won't even need their applause, because by then you'll have built something bigger than respect. You'll have built freedom. The freedom to speak without shrinking. The freedom to walk into any room knowing your worth isn't tied to who claps. The freedom to never chase approval again. So stop fighting for the spotlight. Let others play that game. You build something so undeniable that the light finds you. And when it does, don't use it to throw shade. Use it to illuminate the path. For others who still feel stuck in the same shadows you once stood in. That's real power. That's legacy. That's how you win. Remember what we just talked about. Building your own stage means protecting your peace. And to protect your peace, there's one thing you must learn to do well. Set boundaries. And not just set them, enforce them. Because here's a truth most people never learn until they're drained and broken. Boundaries don't ruin relationships. They reveal who was truly invested in you all along. I remember the exact day I made the decision to stop answering every call from a particular family member. This person only reached out to gossip, criticize, or throw subtle jabs at my life choices, always masked as concern. Every conversation left me feeling small, diminished, like I was constantly being chipped away, bit by bit. but I kept answering. Why? Because I thought, that's what family does, right? Wrong. One afternoon, my phone rang. Same name, same energy. And for the first time ever, I didn't answer. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, turned the phone face down, leaned back and took a deep breath. That silence. At first it was terrifying, and then it was freeing. That moment marked the beginning of one of the most important lessons I've ever learned. A boundary only works if you're actually willing to enforce it, even when it feels uncomfortable. Anyone can say, I don't like being spoken to that way, but if they do it again and you just brush it off, that's not a boundary, that's a suggestion. And suggestions don't change relationships. They protect the dysfunction. To set real boundaries means saying, I won't attend gatherings where I'm constantly insulted under the disguise of jokes. I don't accept unannounced visits. I value my space. If you raise your voice at me, I'll end the conversation. And then this part is critical, so that you follow through. That first time you actually enforce your boundary, it will shake the room. People will talk. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold, that you're being disrespectful. Good. Let them. Because those same people, they never complained when they were the ones crossing the line. It's easy to call someone difficult the moment they stop being easy to manipulate. And here's the raw truth most people won't admit. The ones who get most offended by your boundaries are the ones who benefited the most from you having none. That's why setting them feels scary. Because you know deep down, it will trigger resistance, but ask yourself, what's the alternative? Living a life where you're constantly drained, undervalued, invisible in your own home? No thank you, I've learned this. Enforcing boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about protecting your peace of mind. It's not about being aggressive. It's about being clear, calm, confident, unshakable. And when you commit to this way of being, something powerful happens. The people who truly love and respect you, they'll rise to meet the standard you've set. The ones who don't, they'll drift away, ways which honestly is them doing the emotional labor for you. Boundaries also teach you something vital: to value your time, your energy, your presence. You stop showing up to every argument you're invited to. You stop over-explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop negotiating your self-worth in rooms where no one is even listening. You begin living with clarity, not guilt. And let me tell you, that's when real power begins to grow inside you, because respect doesn't begin with others. It begins with the lines you draw around your peace and your willingness to defend them. So please, stop feeling guilty for protecting your energy. Stop apologizing for needing space. Stop explaining your boundaries to people who have no intention of honoring them. Just enforce them, not with rage, not with resentment, but with calm, grounded action. Because you don't have to raise your voice to stand tall. You don't have to cut people off to reclaim your dignity. You just need to be crystal clear about one thing. The price of access to you is respect. As we've seen, when you start truly respecting yourself, others have only two options: match your energy or leave, and either way, peace is the outcome. Number 5, stop over-explaining yourself. There's a unique kind of exhaustion that comes from constantly having to defend every decision you make, especially to people who never really try to understand you in the first place. You make a life choice till they question it. You say no when they demand an explanation. You pursue a dream. They tell you to be realistic. Suddenly, your entire life starts feeling like a courtroom where you're always on trial. And They're the judge, the jury, and the critic in the back row smirking every time you speak. I've been there. Every decision I made, whether it was skipping a family gathering to stay focused on my goals or cutting off toxic communication, was met with interrogation. Why are you being distant? Do you think you're better than us now? What do you mean you're doing that with your life? And for the longest time I answered, again and again. I thought if I gave them context, backstory, logic, if I was vulnerable enough, they'd finally understand, but they didn't. In fact, the more I explained, the less they respected me. Why? Because over-explaining is often a disguised plea for validation. It's a subtle way of saying, please understand me so I can feel worthy again. And if the person you're explaining yourself to doesn't respect you to begin with, you've already lost the moment you start defending your life. I remember the exact moment this truth landed for me. A family member asked, "Why would you walk away from such a stable job just to chase something so uncertain?" I opened my mouth to explain. Then I stopped, not out of rudeness, but out of clarity. I realized this person isn't genuinely curious. They're not interested in seeing me thrive. They just want me to stay where they feel comfortable, and no amount of explanation would change that. So I simply smiled and said, "Because it feels right to me." That was it. No speech, no breakdown, no defense. And you know what? They didn't understand. But they did start backing off, because when you stop explaining yourself, you stop feeding the illusion that other people get to vote on your life. Here's the truth. People don't need to understand your boundaries to respect them. They just need to know those boundaries are non-negotiable. Over-explaining usually comes from a wounded place, from childhood, from trauma, from the desperate need to be liked, accepted, or approved of. But that habit, it slowly chips away at your peace. You start wasting your breath on people who've already made up their mind about you. You start overanalyzing everything you say. You lie awake at night replaying conversations, wondering if you should have said more. But you shouldn't have, because the people who genuinely love you, they don't need a monologue to respect your no. They don't need a TED talk to support your dreams. They don't ask you to shrink just to keep things comfortable. They see you, and that's enough. So let this be your reminder. You don't owe anyone a long speech just because you said no. You don't need to explain why you're choosing peace over chaos. You don't have to unpack your trauma for people who only want gossip, not healing. The more confident you become in your direction, the quieter your explanations will be, not because of arrogance, but because of self-respect. Because once you realize your life is not a democracy and your inner peace is not up for public vote, everything changes. You stop defending every move. You stop trying to convince people to respect you. You stop trading your voice for temporary approval. Instead, you speak once, clearly, calmly, confidently. And if they don't get it, let them sit with their confusion. When you stop over-explaining your every move, something powerful happens. You begin reclaiming your space. And once you do, you realize something even deeper. Not everyone deserves access to your truth. Number 6, stop oversharing with people who don't value you. Sometimes the most painful wounds don't come from being rejected. They come from being seen and still dismissed. From opening up and then being left hanging in silence or scorn. Have you ever opened your heart to someone? A family member, a friend, someone you thought would understand. You shared your struggles, your dreams, your fears. You laid bare the softest parts of yourself, and they met you with silence, or worse, sarcasm. They made you feel foolish for having emotions, weak for being honest, overdramatic for simply craving connection. That kind of response doesn't just sting. It feels like a betrayal. Because when you overshare with people who don't value you, you're offering sacred pieces of yourself to someone who treats them like they're disposable. I used to be an open book, especially with family, because that's what we're taught, right? Family is everything. Blood is thicker than water. Talk to your loved ones, they care. But here's a hard truth I had to learn the hard way. Not everyone who shares your blood deserves access to your inner world. Oversharing is not vulnerability, not when it's one-sided, not when it's driven by desperation, not when you're just hoping that maybe this time they'll finally see you. I remember once sharing a deeply personal story with a relative, something that had haunted me for years. I was raw. I was open. I thought I was being brave, and you know what they said? You think your life is hard, you should hear what I've been through. Just like that, my pain became a competition. My honesty became a burden. I walked away from that conversation carrying a valuable truth. Oversharing in the wrong rooms is self-betrayal. We often overshare because deep down we're longing for connection. We want to be seen, to be heard, to be held. But when you give the depths of your soul to someone who hasn't earned that trust, you're essentially handing ammunition to a person who doesn't know how to use a weapon. And they'll use it not behind your back, but to your face. You're so sensitive. You always make it about you. No wonder nobody wants to be around you. Suddenly, your truth becomes their entertainment. Your vulnerability becomes their punchline. So here's the shift. Start treating your inner world like a locked vault, not a public bulletin board. Not everyone deserves access to your dreams. Not everyone should know what keeps you up at night. Not everyone has the emotional maturity to carry what you're holding. And that's not your fault. The issue isn't that you're vulnerable. Vulnerability is powerful. The issue is who you're being vulnerable with. You have to learn to discern before you disclose. To pause and ask, has this person earned my trust? Do they have the capacity to hold this truth without twisting it? Are they here to support me or to judge me? Because your story, your heart, your healing, it's sacred. And not everyone deserves a front row seat to it. So before you share your soul, your truth, your story, pause. Not everyone deserves a key to your inner world. Discernment must come before disclosure. Now ask yourself these questions. Honestly, has this person ever used my words against me? Do I feel lighter or drained after opening up to them? Do they truly listen, or are they just waiting for their turn to speak? Do they hold space, or do they jump to judgment? Because if someone constantly dismisses your feelings, if they minimize your pain, invalidate your experience, or turn your vulnerability into gossip, then hear this clearly. You owe them nothing, not your memories, not your explanations, and certainly not your pain. In fact, silence can be one of the most sacred, powerful expressions of self-respect. I've learned that the more I protect my emotional energy, the clearer and calmer my mind becomes. The less I speak to people who don't get me, the louder I hear my own voice. You don't need to be understood by everyone to be whole. You don't need to argue your worth into existence. And you never need to expose your soul just to feel visible. True connection, real intimacy, is never loud. It's quiet, it's safe, it's mutual. So if you've been feeling unseen, unheard, or disrespected, take a moment to step back. Ask yourself, am I giving too much of myself to people who only return crumbs? If the answer is yes, then it's time to retreat. Not in fear, not in bitterness, but in strength. Because your truth is sacred, and not everyone is holy enough. to hear it. 7. Create distance without guilt. One of the hardest things you'll ever do, especially when it involves family, is choose space over obligation. We're made to believe that wanting peace means we're doing something wrong, that if we take a step back, we're somehow betraying the people who raised us, who share our blood, who say they care. But here's the truth I had to learn, painfully and slowly. Being related to someone doesn't give them the right to drain you. I used to feel guilty for not answering calls, for skipping toxic family gatherings, for saying no without a follow-up excuse. But with time, I realized the only thing I was betraying was myself. Creating distance doesn't mean you hate them. It simply means you're choosing to protect your peace. Some people are better loved from afar, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. I stopped over-justifying my boundaries. I stopped forcing connections that only hurt me. And the result? My mind became quieter. My chest stopped feeling heavy. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. You don't need some dramatic reason to walk away. Sometimes the way someone makes you feel is reason enough. If someone constantly disrespects your boundaries, makes you feel small, brings chaos into your life, you have every right to create space. Let go of the guilt. You're not cold, you're not cruel. You're simply choosing yourself. Maybe for the first time ever. If your family mocks your dreams, disrespects your emotions, or treats you like you're too much, remember this: you don't need to fight. You don't need to argue. You don't need to beg for basic respect. Because the truth is, respect that has to be demanded was already broken. You don't owe your pain to tradition. You don't owe your silence to keep peace. You don't owe your identity to people who only love the version of you they can control. You are not too sensitive. You are not the problem. You are not selfish for wanting peace. You are healing. You are growing into a version of yourself that no longer fits the box they tried to keep you in. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. You'll feel guilt. You'll question yourself. You might even feel lonely for a while. But that pain, that's not punishment. That's the price of transformation. Because the moment you stop chasing approval and start standing in self-respect, everything shifts. You speak with clarity. You move with conviction. You radiate a quiet confidence that doesn't ask for attention. It commands it. Let them talk. Let them misunderstand. Let them walk away, because the people meant for you will never need to be convinced to treat you with dignity. So walk your path, not for revenge, not to prove a point, but because you finally understand your worth. And once you do, you'll never let anyone, not even family, treat you like you're less than whole again.